friend. So I had a completely different episode planned for today. The outline was done, the notes were ready, fully prepared to talk about authenticity, actually. And then Apple dropped an announcement, and my inbox and DMs have not been quiet since. So many of y'all have been sending me questions and screenshots and voice memos, all the things. So when the people speak, I pivot. But before we get into all the things that Apple announced, what it means, I want to acknowledge something. And I mentioned it in Tuesday's email that went out about Apple Podcasts and the video update. So anytime Apple makes a major announcement, the internet amplifies it into a crisis. Threads go loud, hot takes pile up, and suddenly you're wondering if maybe you've missed the boat, that you've fallen behind, or you made the wrong call by staying audio only. So I want to stop the spiral right here. You are not behind. This is not an emergency. What Apple announced is genuinely significant. I'll give them that. But it is infrastructure. And infrastructure is not a personal deadline. So today on the show, we're going to walk through what actually changed, what it actually means for the industry, and how to make a clear-headed decision for your show. There's no panic. There's no performance. There's no pressure. Now, I'll also cover what Apple announced, what HLS actually is, where the hosting platforms currently stand right now, and what we're seeing as a potential monetization opportunity. And I'm going to give you a framework for deciding what, if anything, you should do about this recent announcement. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. So here's the plain English version. Apple's beta version of iOS 26.4 now includes support for HLS, which is HTTP live streaming, for video podcast distribution. HLS is Apple's adaptive streaming format. It's been standard for video delivery in apps and browsers for years. So what's new about this? Well, video podcasts can now be distributed through RSS, the same feed that already distributes your audio. So that's the actual shift. And it matters more than it might sound. Because until now, video meant fragmentation. You would upload your podcast to your platform, the audio version would automatically go out. Then you had to upload to YouTube. You had to upload separately to Spotify. And it's quite taxing on your podcast workflow. With this HLS support, it's baked into the Apple Podcast ecosystem. So video can live with your podcast host and distribute outward through your RSS feed, the same way your audio already does. One feed, multiple destinations. So think of it less as Apple is adding video and more as Apple is aligning its infrastructure with how modern podcast distribution already works. So the highway is being built, but you don't get to drive on it today. Now, there is an important caveat for this to actually work. Your hosting platform has to support HLS video distribution. Right now, not all of them do, and that is perfectly okay. So Acast has already publicly stated that they're working toward full HLS distribution support to Apple Podcasts. YouTube and Spotify are reportedly moving in that same direction. And that cross-platform alignment is really very meaningful because when the three biggest podcast distribution platforms adopt the same tech standard, it stops being a niche feature and becomes the foundation. But working toward is not live. This is a gradual rollout. And gradual is actually healthy, just like our relationships. It gives you time to observe, to evaluate, and make a deliberate choice rather than scrambling to react to a beta announcement. Now, if your host does not support it yet, it's okay. You're not losing any ground. The tools are not universally available. The way that I see this is that creators who win long term are the ones who will understand where the infrastructure is going and plan accordingly, not the ones who sprint to adopt every feature in its first week. Now, the part of this that I'm really paying close attention to is a monetization shift that I think is going to happen. And I really believe that it deserves a real conversation. Because the major unlock of all of this isn't just video and RSS. While that's very cool, it's what video in RSS enables: dynamic ad insertion for video at scale. So if you've been involved in podcasting for a few years, you know about DAI, dynamic ad insertion. And it has fundamentally changed audio monetization. Before it, ads were baked into files, inventory was fixed, revenue was capped, ads were not relevant. After DAI, we can now rotate ads in and out of any episode. Inventory became flexible, ads became relevant, and revenue scaled in ways that just weren't possible before. Video has never had that at the podcast infrastructure level. Video advertising has existed, obviously, right? But not with the same seamless host-read, dynamically inserted model that made audio podcast ads so valuable. Now, the way I see it is this. If HLS becomes the standard across Apple, YouTube, and Spotify, DAI for video could follow the same path it took for audio. And that means, because of a persistent gap in the industry, podcast audiences are large and they're highly engaged, but ad spending has consistently underperformed relative to the audience size. Now, the argument has always been that audio is hard to verify, it's hard to measure, and lacks the visual engagement signal advertisers are used to from video platforms. We've been saying this for years. It's one of the things I constantly say in strategy calls when we're talking analytics. But video podcasting with scalable ad tech closes several of those objections all at the same time. So this is a long game. Dynamic video ad insertion across the podcast ecosystem is trajectory. It's not a quarter two revenue lever, but the direction is clear. The infrastructure being built now is designed to eventually make video podcast monetization as flexible and scalable as audio already is. So if you have a podcast with strong audience engagement and a topic that lends itself to video, this is worth watching closely. Now, of course, I will be watching it through all things so that I can bring this information to you, my friend. But I want to address something that I got a lot of questions about, and basically it was, is audio dying? So I want to address that fear directly here. The answer is no. So recently, Triton Digital released a bunch of new data based on U.S. podcasts. It kind of puts it into perspective. And so the two biggest things that came out of this report from Triton was that, one, only 7% of people exclusively watch podcasts. Okay, 7, not 70, 7. And then the other thing that kind of popped out at me was 80% of podcast consumers both watch and listen, depending on context. This 80% is crucial. And it tells us that audiences aren't choosing between audio and video. They're moving fluidly between them. They may listen in the car, on a walk, at the gym. They may watch at home while sitting on the couch, trying to relax from the day, maybe while they're eating lunch. So that same listener consumes podcasts in multiple formats across a single week. And this kind of reframes the entire conversation. For the last year, people have been asking me, is video replacing audio? And I always kind of believed it was a complementary type of activity. So it's not replacing audio. It's layering on top of it. Audio will always remain the foundational format because it's the most flexible for consumption. Video adds a layer of engagement and, yes, discoverability, particularly for new audiences, finding you through platforms like YouTube, which has one of the highest rates for discoverability of podcasts. For many shows, especially those that are conversational or educational or visual in nature, offering both formats makes sense strategically. But audio-only type shows aren't being left behind by this data. They're serving the majority, the 80% who listen more than they watch. So let's actually talk some strategy. So I've given you lots of information already. But what do you actually do with this information? Before you make any decision about it, whether you're adding video, you're switching hosts, you're restructuring your workflow, I want you to filter it through 3 questions. 1, does video serve your message or just perform quote-unquote growth? Because some shows are genuinely enhanced by video. If you teach frameworks visually, walk through tactical demos, use whiteboards or data, or have a format where seeing your face and space adds meaning, video may amplify what you're already doing. But if your show is more devotional, reflective, narrative-driven, or heavily produced audio, adding a camera doesn't improve the content. It just adds overhead. And the question isn't, should podcasters do video? The question actually is, does video make my show better for my audience? Number 2, can you sustain it? As I've constantly mentioned on this show for the last several years, consistency is the name of the game. It's the variable that matters most in podcasting. Full stop. If adding video production to your workflow makes it harder for you to show up every week, if it slows down your editing process, it definitely will increase your costs, or it raises the activation energy that's required to record, then you're not growing, you're straining. An expansion that destables your consistency is not a win. And then 3, is this your season for infrastructure or clarity? Because let's be honest, some seasons are for building, some are for pruning, some are for refining. And if you're still trying to find your voice, you're trying to tighten up your format, or maybe you're building your core audience, adding video production is almost certainly not the highest leverage move right now. If you have a stable show, clear audience, and bandwidth and financial resources to experiment with video, that's an entirely different conversation. There's no universal answer here. There's only your answer and what's right for you, your audience, and your show. Podcasting has changed a lot over these last 21 years that I've been involved with it. It doesn't look anything like it does when I discovered it back in 2005. And yes, that makes me feel kind of old just saying that, but it's true. So here's what I keep coming back to when we start to see these industry changes, these tech changes. And it's Psalm 127, verse 1, that says, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Because infrastructure matters. Platform strategy matters. Distribution matters. But the foundation, the message, the assignment that you've been given, the person you're called to serve, that is what carries your podcast. You can build the most technically optimized podcast on the internet and still have nothing worth saying. James chapter 1, verse 5 says this, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously. And I believe that this applies to microphones and monetization strategies and HLS streaming formats. The pace of technology can create this illusion that all decisions are urgent. We've got to decide now. But the thing is, they almost never are. Wisdom moves slower than the news cycle. And that's not a flaw. It's a feature. The difference between creators who burn out and creators who build something lasting usually isn't talent. I know that might land hard for some of you. It's whether they're moving from the assignment or from anxiety. One is rooted, the other one is reactive. And you know which one you want to be. Of all the years I've spent in being an entrepreneur, learning from business leaders, learning from other podcast leaders, even being coached by one of the best business coaches in the business, here's one thing that I've learned, and that's calm leaders observe trends without being controlled by them. They understand infrastructure, what it is, where it's going, without mistaking potential for urgency. They evaluate timing honestly, taking into account their own season, their capacity, and what their objective or their mission is. And they move intentionally, which sometimes the decision is not yes or no, but not yet. Apple has laid the groundwork. The industry is aligning with that. The opportunity will still be there in 6 months. You don't have to act today. Now, as this thing progresses, we're going to learn more about what it is and what it means, potential pricing that will happen within the platforms, because there's going to be a fee, most likely with Apple Podcasts for this, which in turn will probably be passed on through hosting platforms to build some of this infrastructure. We don't know what that is yet, and so we're going to have to keep an eye on that. Let me be clear one more time. This is not the end of audio. It's not chaos. It's evolution. And in podcasting, evolution has always meant layering, not replacing. Your calling doesn't hinge on your camera quality. Your audience connection doesn't depend on your streaming format. Your message still matters way more than the medium. So let's proceed calmly. Let's move wisely. And remember, you can love Jesus and analytics. And as always, life is way too short for boring podcasts. Thanks for tuning in today, friends. I hope this episode was valuable for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at tammy@wildfirecreativecompany.com. I'll talk to you next week. Bye, y'all.